Hey guys, it's me, Mrs. Hart, and we're going to attempt to do our lesson today via video. So this is a bit new to me, and hopefully we can get all the glitches worked out and you'll be able to just follow along and do some of these drawings at home in your sketchbook. So just like always, we're going to start with a 15-minute drawing of our hand. So if you can turn to the next page in your sketchbook, the one after the last bunch of drawings that you did of the human figures. So if you flip, you should be able to see those drawings that we did of some of our classmates when they were posing for us at the front of the room. That's where we ended off, and today we're just going to pick up from there with some more complex poses. So hopefully you can find the next page there in your sketchbook. Before we get on to the human figure, we're going to start with our hand. So the pose for today, I figured we could do a little bit of a challenge. Maybe you could, something like this. Let's hold our hand out like that, cross our two fingers, and then you can either draw it from the inside like this, or you can do it from the back of your hand like that. So let's take 15 minutes, and you know what to do. We're using careful observation to very carefully draw our hand based on what we see, not what we think we see. So the best way to do that is to be looking frequently at our hand and just trying to get all those fine details in there. So I'm going to give us a few minutes to try to capture this pose. And just like we do in class, we'll concentrate, we'll kind of stop our minds and stop the distractions and just concentrate on getting a beautiful rendering of this hand in that particular pose. All right, so again, we start with outlines, followed by details. And details includes all those little wrinkles. Look how wrinkly my hand is. I think it's probably more wrinkly than yours is. Anyway, once we have all those wrinkles established, we're still not done because we have to tackle the shading. So we've talked about this in class, but you're going to be looking for areas like this in your shading. You see how dark that is? There's like no light getting in there. And you know from your value scale that you've got to get in there really dark. Don't just go halfway, but go in there with a nice dark number 10. I've got a few more spots like that. You see this shape here? This is a number 10 black. Just fill it in really solid. And there's one more. It's this little spot in here. It's very wrinkly. So I'm just going to block that in dark. And then I'm going to keep looking for more shades and more details. So you keep drawing and I'll meet you back when we're done. Alright, so by now about 15 minutes has passed and you can have a look at that drawing, see how it turned out for you. Hopefully you got lots of detail and lots of shading in there. And like we've been doing in class, have a bit of a flip back to some of those first hands that we drew at the beginning of this semester and have a look at how much you've improved since then. Alright, let's put that aside and we're going to flip the page onto our next drawing. I'm not working in a sketchbook today, so I've just got some loose sheets of paper. All right, what we got to do now is we're going to review what we called the gesture method of drawing from last week. So I know that a few of you were missing. I know Ben, you missed this, and I think Claire, you may have missed this if I'm remembering right. But anyway, we're just going to review it for the people that weren't there. Oh, Matthew, you missed this too. So you got to pay extra careful attention. So the others have done this once, but we're just going to review. So the gesture method, just to review this, as we said last week, you're not going to be drawing a person by starting right away with details. And this is usually what we do. We start with details. We make this mistake of drawing a person with all of its outlines, right? So you can draw a person like that. I guess there's nothing wrong with it, and it's how most of us will draw a person. But the trouble is it's flat and it's cartoony, and it doesn't really look like it's in motion, like that there's any movement there. So this is not exactly how we want to draw. Too many outlines, that figure is being like held really tight in that pose. So what we learned last week, sorry, that would have been 2 weeks ago now, is how to do this gesture. So a gesture is a head, spine, hips, legs in 2 parts, with feet at the bottom, shoulder line with shoulder holes at the sides for the arms, and then we've got our arms like that. So this little guy here is called a gesture, and the idea of the gesture is that you draw him first. That happens first, and then when that's established, you would go on and put these details on top. But really important to get the gesture and its proportions correct before you add detail. So last week we did a whole bunch of these. We probably did like 20 different gestures. We had used the mannequins, and then toward the end of class we were standing up and posing for each other. And it's too bad that we can't meet, because that was a lot of fun. And I know some of you were looking forward to posing, and you didn't get a chance to. Anyway, if you can find a sibling or a parent who's willing to pose for you, it would be a really good idea to spend about 15 minutes going over some of these gestures. So you can put, if you have a mannequin, you can put them in different poses and try to capture that pose. Or if you've got someone modeling for you, you can capture their pose. So for example, this guy is going to look a bit like this. Right, and he's got a crooked shoulder line. His arms are sort of on angles here. Right, and then he's got his arm up in a wave, like that. So the idea is we can easily bend these guys into all different poses and draw pretty much any pose that we want from here on. Okay, so at this point, it's probably important to review the proportions of the gesture. So we're going to start with the head, and you can draw along with me, followed by the spine and the hips. So those are the first 3 steps, and we're going to double check that you've made the hips only a tiny little bit wider than you've made the head. If you have big wide hips, your whole gesture is going to get really weird really fast. So if you need to trim them off a bit, we're going to keep them nice and narrow. Next step is to measure. So top of the head to hips is equal to the distance from hips to feet. So I'm going to make a line here, and now I know that this line is where the feet have to end up eventually. If you don't take this measurement, what's going to happen is your feet are going to end up way up here. You'll make the legs way too short. Okay, so the next steps is the sausages that represent the 2 parts of the legs, and a circle for the knee, like that. And at the bottom we have, so we've got the feet at the bottom. You can do one sticking out and one facing you. All right, the shoulder line is slightly curved. We've left a little room for the neck. We're going to put a shoulder on each side, join it to the hips, and if you did this right, there should be a slight taper. The shoulder line is only a little bit wider than the hips. Okay, so it's time to take another measurement. We're going to put a little line halfway down the first sausage. That is where your fingertips hang when your arm is hanging down. So arm, 2 sausages, elbow is represented by a circle, and the hand is represented by an oval. So now you can bend him in any direction, right? If you need to move it up, you can move it up. You could do any position with these joints. Okay, so a couple maybe take a couple minutes to try your gesture once more and pay careful attention to this measurement equaling that measurement, and then just really watch width of the hips and width of the shoulder. All right, we're going to try some of these poses. Your parents will have been emailed a document that's got these poses on it. So I want you to just take a few minutes capturing the 9 poses that you see here. So you're going to maybe spend like about 2 minutes on each one at the most. Remember, we get really fast at them. Another important thing when you do this sheet is to try to do it lightly, very, very lightly. I'm going to start with this one here for the demo, just because these are just a little dull. But I'm going to grab this pose just to show you how lightly we should be doing it. So head is on an angle, spine is on an angle, hips are straight, measure, mark off your feet. So this pose is interesting because the one leg goes in front of the other leg, like that. So they are going to just get a little more complex, and it's nothing that you can't handle through careful observation. See that? So now our shoulder line, it's still pretty straight. Remember, it's only a little bit wider than the hips. And join them up. Now her arms are doing some interesting things. So we're just going to try to capture exactly what we see there. That hand goes behind the head, and then this one's going across the body. Elbow and hand. And notice that this is nice and light. All right, super important. Draw as lightly as you can. So once you've done all 9, we'll be ready for the last drawing of the lesson. All right. Also in that doc are some really cute little illustrations of some kids. Most of them are kids. This is sort of like a grumpy looking guy. He's in there. He's not my favorite, but I put him in there in case anyone would like to draw him. The idea here, you're going to pick your favorite one. You're going to start with a gesture, really light. Later, you will add the details and the shading on top. All right, so for example, I'm just going to take this one here. I think she's cute, so I'll do that one. And the gesture is going to be drawn as lightly as possible. Head, spine, hips, measure, legs. They're pretty much straight on. Right, just like that. Then we've got shoulder line, a little bit wider than the hips, so that when we connect, there's a slight taper. And then we can do something interesting with her arms and hands. So this arm is up and out a little bit because she's holding on to the tip of her skirt there. This one goes down first and then up, and then she's got that hand out. So this is your gesture, and you're going to check the proportions, check it all over, make sure everything looks correct. And once it's correct, we're going to move on to the next layer, which is detail. So step 1, gesture. Step 2, detail. All right, so you've kept your gesture nice and light. The detail is when you can go dark. So now we're going to layer our details right on top of the rest of the drawing, right on top of the gesture. And now we're going to just press a little bit harder. So see how if the gesture was done in maybe like a 3 on the value scale, the details are going to be done in a 6 or a 7. That's really important. So now we sort of dress it up with all of its all of those fine details, and this is the fun part. And the beauty of the gesture drawing is you already know that everything is going in the right spot because you've established your proportions properly through a gesture. So now you can just kind of relax and add all these details without things going all weird on you. So this is a really great way to be drawing the human figure. They tend to turn out pretty fabulously. So we're just going to take our time and continue filling in all this detail folds and wrinkles in the clothing. Don't be afraid of that amount of detail. Just go ahead and tackle it. It just takes a little bit of time and patience. If you just do a little bit at a time, they will turn out fine. Even these like funny little finger areas, just slow it right down. All right, she is wearing a striped dress, so that means I've got to tackle all those stripes. But even that won't be so bad. This is about a 15-minute drawing. So we have to fill that time anyway. So we'll just take our time and come along and fill that with some nice light stripes. When you're doing patterns, keep them light. If you draw them really dark, it tends to distract from the important parts. So that's in there nice and light. And now I'll finish the detail on the legs. So here too, the only thing you can do is carefully observe the shapes that you're seeing. Right? Just watch your reference like crazy. Don't assume that you know what these curves will be. Follow your reference. So again, slightly darker than the gesture. She's got some buckles and straps on her boots. And her feet are just sort of like touching each other in a cute little way there. This buckle there. All right, so we have done our detail on top. So we've got number 1, gesture, nice and light. Number 2, detail a little darker. And number 3 is value. Value is the fancy word for shading. So we're going to tackle our shading next. Look for your 10s. If you remember the value scale we've been working on, a 10 is way at that other end where things are almost completely black. And don't be afraid of your 10s. You've heard me say this lots of times, but I'll just say it again. Okay, she's got like an N on her sweater, her jacket. Put that N in there. So a 10 again is not that. That is not enough, right? We're going to take our 10 and we're going to tackle it and fill it right in with the pencil. Just like that. And that's a proper 10. A few 10s on the stripes here. Put some stripes on the end of the sleeves. The nice thing about this part of the sleeves is they're white, so we don't even have to do them. The inside of the brim, that looks like it's about an 8. So pretty dark. The outside of the hat is also dark, but not as dark as the brim. So it's got a shadow here that looks like a 10. And the rest of it is maybe a 5. So we're going to take our time and shade this whole drawing in. There's going to be a few subtle shadows in here, but mostly it's a line drawing because it's cartoony, so you don't have to worry too much about a lot of shadows. So remember what I told you about hair? That hair is not a frizz ball. It's not a whole bunch of crazy lines, all that stuff. Hair is a shape, right? Her hair is a shape. So you've drawn it first as a shape, and now you just shade it in. And you can spend, like I said, up to 15 minutes on this drawing. You could deal with every shade, or you can kind of just get the main idea of the shapes. And finally her shoes. Those are also a 10, right? Really dark. So we'll get those all the way. This is a 10, right? This is not a 10. So we're going to take our time and get that 10 to go all the way it's meant to. Okay, and by the time you have spent about 15 minutes on that, you'll have a really excellent drawing of this figure. And what's amazing is you've done it in the right method, and that's why it turned out so well compared to if you had just done that first. So that brings us to the end of our class. If you're loving it and you want to try a second one or a third one, you go right ahead. This one's really cool. I think I would try this one too if I had some extra time. All right, so that's the end of lesson 1. Happy drawing, and I will check in again with an email to your parents next week. And that's when we're going to start to do some more complicated poses of people like jumping in the air and twisting around. It'll be really fun. So I will see you guys then. Take care.